This episode of the series Black Mirror is set in 1970s England, and it follows an Indian woman named Nita, an average worker in a department store. Nita is timid and is always being pushed around by Vicky, her co-worker, and other people, mainly because of racism. In the beginning of the episode, Nita is seen eating during her break when Vicky comes in to tell her to serve the customer even though she could do it herself. When Nita saw who the customer was, she was reluctant to serve him. The customer is a man named Keith Holligan, a man known for murdering his wife. But having no choice, Nita served Keith, who was blatantly and creepily flirting with Nita. Nita didn't do anything. She just quietly prepared the shoes for Keith. But deep inside, she was imagining that she was strangling Keith to death. Maybe it was because she had no friends and was treated like a social reject simply because of her race, but Nita has been having a lot of violent thoughts towards people who are shamelessly trying to put her down. Later that day, Nita noticed a group gathering outside the store. She went out to see what it was about and realized that a guy named Michael Smart was having a mini-campaign. Nita listened to Michael's message to the audience, seeing through the racism hinted at in Michael's words, before she decided to go back to work. Later that night, Nita went back home, ignoring the two men watching her, and watched a show in which a certain actor was starring. The next day, she left her home when she saw racist abbreviations written on her door. She ignored it and went to work. At work, Nita was staring at a jacket when Vicky approached, stating that the outfit wouldn't suit her before telling Nita that Mr. Duncan, their boss, was looking for Nita. Nita talked with Mr. Duncan, who told Nita to stop eating what she eats in the stockroom as its smell is lingering and bothering other people, mainly Vicky. Since Nita brought a biryani for lunch that day, Mr. Duncan advised Nita to eat it in the basement. Nita then went behind the counter and stared at Vicky, who was leaning on it. She grabbed Vicky's head and slammed it against the glass counter. But of course, it was just her imagination. In reality, she just walked away, telling Vicky that she was taking her lunch break before going to the basement. After eating, Nita saw a small drawer that seemed out of place. She pulled it open but cut her hand, causing it to bleed. She sucked the blood off her forefinger and pulled out a stone talisman. That night, Nita was observing the talisman when she heard a voice coming from it. The voice introduced himself as Garp, the demon number 79 inside the talisman, and told Nita that she had accidentally summoned her when the blood on her finger got smeared on the talisman. Nita dropped the talisman and hid, while the voice inside the talisman was complaining about her dropping him. When Nita picked up the talisman again, the voice continued explaining a task given to Nita. Within 3 days, Nita is to sacrifice 3 humans, or else the world is going to end. And if Nita wants the demon inside the talisman to help her, she needs to grant Garp permission to get out of the talisman. Nita reluctantly permitted the demon to leave the talisman, and the lights started flickering before completely turning off. Moments later, she heard an eerie sound coming from behind her, and when she turned around, she backed away in fear when she saw a demon standing before her. Seeing her scared, Garp the demon decided to look into Nita's soul and change his appearance into something that Nita finds appealing, which is actually the actor she was watching in a show. Garp tried explaining things to Nita again, but when Nita still didn't understand, the demon decided to just show her what was going to happen instead. Garp made Nita see the future, a city being engulfed in flames. Nita was scared and panicked when she saw the whole house on fire. She went to look out the window and saw that the whole city was the same. Garp, on the other hand, was casually rambling and walking around as he watched Nita run around in fear. He stopped Nita's hallucination, and Nita left the house, running away from him. It was useless, though, as Garp is basically everywhere she is. Nita stopped to nag at Garp, not noticing a man approaching from behind with a dog. Garp was casually persuading Nita to kill the first sacrifice, and when the man behind Nita called to get Nita's attention, Nita tried to tell the man to make Garp leave. But the man can't see Garp because he is a demon, and only the one who summoned him can see him. Garp told Nita that the man deserved to die and showed her all the things that the man had done. The man is actually an incestuous pedophile who has been visiting and violating his own 8-year-old daughter every night. Enraged at such a disgusting creature, Nita clobbered him on the head with a brick, and the man fell to the river, dead. Nita couldn't believe that she had just killed someone. She rushed back home and stared into nothingness, mulling over having killed a man. Nita then called the police station in an attempt to turn herself in, but she couldn't do it. Garp warned her that if she turned herself in, she wouldn't be able to make the 3 sacrifices, which would then result in billions of people dying. 3 people getting killed and sacrificed is definitely much better than billions of people dying. Later that day, Nita went to work, with Garp following her around. Vicky berated her for being late and made fun of her appearance. Garp commended Vicky for making a worthy sacrifice, but Nita just ignored his insinuation. For the whole time Nita was working, Garp did nothing but suggest different people for Nita to kill. Meanwhile, the pedophile's body has been found, and the detectives are now looking into it. Later that night, Garp changed the channel on the TV to show Nita the news about the nuclear attack that is presumed to have hit the country. Finally convinced, Nita looked for a weapon she could use, despite the worry and hesitancy she was still feeling. Garp told her to use a hammer as she is a smasher, based on how she killed the first sacrifice. They went to a bar, and Nita ordered 2 triple scotches to calm her nerves. While she was drinking, she observed the people in the bar, with Garp telling her all the terrible things they had done so they could choose a suitable sacrifice. Garp pointed out Keith Holligan, who was also in the bar, and Nita expressed her displeasure towards the guy. Keith noticed Nita staring at him and stared back at her. Nita doubled over due to the throbbing she felt because of the alcohol, and when she looked up again, Keith Holligan was gone. Nita and Garp left the bar and followed Keith. Just as she was about to rush him, Keith noticed her and invited her to his home, assuming that Nita wanted to do the nasty with him. Nita accepted his invitation, and they went to his messy house. In his bedroom, Nita mustered up her courage while Keith was in the bathroom. When Keith went back to the bedroom and saw the hammer in Nita's hand, he flumped down on the bed, seemingly resigned to his fate. Right before he could justify why he killed his wife, Nita struck him on the head. Garp, on the other hand, was wincing as he watched Nita smash Keith's head repeatedly. Garp told her to take the hammer used against Keith and leave the house. But when Nita proceeded to leave, he saw Keith's brother, Chris, who caught her. Garp reminded her not to leave any witnesses, so against Nita's better judgment, she had no choice but to kill the man too. Chris fought back, and Nita struggled to kill him. Nita was able to stab Chris and kill him before he could strike her with the hammer he managed to grab hold of. Nita apologized as she watched the life seep out of Chris right before the clock struck 12. Back in Nita's house, the latter was beating herself up for killing 2 people in one night. Garp tried to comfort her by saying that she had already made 2 sacrifices in one night. But when he looked at the talisman, he noticed something weird about the pitchfork symbol on the stone talisman. Pitchforks have 3 sharp points called prongs. As Nita sacrifices one person, one prong should disappear from the pitchfork symbol. Nita has killed 3 people, so Garp expected that all 3 prongs would have been erased. But despite having made 3 sacrifices, there was still 1 prong left. Confused, Garp called Hell to inquire about the sacrifices. It was then revealed that only 2 sacrifices have been recorded because Keith was ineligible to be sacrificed because he's a murderer. People who have killed at least 1 person are not suitable to be sacrifices because, according to Satan's logic, murderers are playing for the home team, which means Keith already has a special place in hell and doesn't have to be sacrificed anymore. Nita was furious and criticized Garp for finding all these killings fun. But Garp denied it and admitted that if he failed his mission to get 3 sacrifices, he'd be cast into a boundless void, doomed to spend eternity in a dimension of infinite nothingness. Nita was speechless. She could feel for Garp, as she had been living a life shunned by everyone. She opened up to Garp, stating that she never wished harm on anyone, which Garp laughed off. He explained that Nita wouldn't have been able to summon him if she didn't harbor any hatred towards anyone or if she didn't secretly want to hurt those who ostracized her. Nita was corruptible, she was hateful, and the talisman felt that dark force hidden deep inside her, the reason why she was a perfect pawn for the sacrificial killing. The next day at work, Nita was staring at Vicky with a scornful look, seemingly having chosen Vicky to be her next sacrifice. Nita snapped out of it when Vicky approached and ordered her to deal with a customer. Nita realized that the young customer was the daughter of the man she first killed. Garp assured Nita that the girl may still be mourning for her father's death, but she was secretly still glad that he was gone and wouldn't be able to put hands on her now. Later that day, Mr. Duncan showed up at the footwear store with Michael Smart. He told Vicky to serve Michael, as the guy wanted to buy new shoes, before harshly whispering to Nita to fix up the boxes scattered around the floor. Nita cleaned the boxes and took them to the stockroom, passing by Michael and Vicky, who were talking in hushed voices. Michael was asking Vicky to vote for her, but Vicky didn't want to, as she wanted to support the National Front, whose goal is to kick the non-whites out of their country. Michael then eerily whispered to Vicky to vote for him, as he also stands for the discontinuation of immigration and deportation of non-white immigrants, which basically falls under racism. Nita demanded Garp show her Michael's future, and Garp did. Nita saw that Michael Smart was going to be the next prime minister. He would declare a war against the non-whites in Britain and would kill thousands, if not millions, of people. Enraged, Nita chose Michael to be her next sacrifice, but Garp disagreed, as it would be a huge deal since Michael is a politician. Garp tried to make different excuses to stop Nita from killing Michael, but all his arguments were refuted by Nita, who was already determined to kill Michael. She walked out of the store, stealing the jacket she'd been eyeing on her way. Meanwhile, Garp was baffled at how quickly Nita changed. Meanwhile, two detectives are seen at the crime scene where Keith and Chris are found dead. They were the same detectives who found the first sacrifice's body and are responsible for investigating and searching for the suspect, which is Nita. They went to the bar, where Keith and Nita were, to ask around for any clues. The bartender mentioned Nita but couldn't say anything else as he didn't really know her, just that she's an Indian. The waitress then told them that the said Indian woman works in footwear. Later that night, Nita was planning how she would murder Michael when she was visited by the male detective, who introduced himself as Len Fisher. Nita allowed him in, and Fisher started asking her questions about the night she was in the bar. Nita lied, and even though Fisher didn't believe her, she still managed to get off the hook. After Fisher left, Nita rushed to lay out her plan to kill Michael. She drove away from her home, not realizing that she was being followed by Fisher. Meanwhile, Michael just left the campaign, and Nita followed him. Both Michael and Nita's cars passed by the train tracks, but Fisher couldn't as the barrier gates moved down as an indication that a train was coming. Garp was still trying to convince Nita not to kill Michael and just choose someone else, but Nita told him to just piss off, and the demon did. Nita clipped Michael's car, and the latter's car collided against a tree. Seeing that Michael survived, Nita took her hammer and struck Michael with it. But before she could strike Michael one more time, Fisher arrived and stopped her. Nita told the detective about what was going to happen if she didn't kill Michael, but Fisher was able to talk her out of it. Realizing that she'd failed, Nita cried out for Garp, apologizing for failing him. Fisher took the hammer out of Nita's hand and hugged her, comforting the girl despite her almost killing Michael. Nita got arrested, and she admitted everything she had done. The female detective showed her the stone talisman, and Nita noticed the symbol had changed. She confessed about the talisman, about Garp, and about the nuclear war that would occur if she didn't sacrifice 3 people within 3 days. Nita stared at the clock, waiting for the clock to strike 12. When it did, nothing happened, and she was confused. The detectives thought that she was just not mentally well and left her alone for a while. That's when they heard a loud alarm. They ran out to check what was happening while Nita apologized to Garp, who finally showed up. Garp asked her if she wanted to go with him to the void, where they could keep each other company forever. The detectives saw and realized that Nita was telling the truth. They witnessed the nuclear explosion and braced themselves for what was coming. Meanwhile, Nita agreed to go with Garp into the void. The whole place was engulfed with flames, but the two of them just calmly walked towards the nothingness with their hands clasped together and smiles etched on their faces. Thank you for watching, and please watch the other recap movie on our channel.